And we begin this hour with news from the campaign trail where Donald Trump is keeping the focus on the East Coast today as he tries to close the gap with rival Hillary Clinton. Hello and welcome to another hour of America's Election Headquarters. I'm Uma Pemaraju. Mr. Trump spending part of his day in Virginia, a state where he trails Mrs. Clinton by double digits. He's trying to seek more support from minority communities that have remained reluctant to back him. Polls show that he still has work to do to get their votes, and within the past hour in New York City, the Republican nominee has been meeting with Hispanic leaders. He's making it clear he wants their support. Let's get the very latest now from Peter Ducey, who's standing by live from Fredericksburg, Virginia, where Mr. Trump plans another rally later today. Peter?
And Uma, something that we're seeing here in Fredericksburg, Virginia, is a very long line to get into this Trump event, more than 4 hours before he is even set to be here. This is something that we've seen wherever Trump goes, even when the headlines about his campaign are not so good. But the scene was not so good last night outside of a Trump fundraiser in Minneapolis, where folks that went to this event, closed-door event, because they wanted to donate money to Donald Trump, were harassed. They were spit on. Some of them, we've seen some social media images, were even punched and kicked by protesters on their way out. So obviously, donors have a right to donate. Protesters have a right to protest. But it seemed like last night in Minnesota, things escalated to an unruly level when some of the Trump supporters were, in fact, abused in some way. So we are looking for some more information on that. In the meantime, this is what Trump has to look forward to later on today. Big crowd in a swing state. Right now, Trump is up in Manhattan still, not far away from where you are. He's sitting down with Hispanic leaders from 12 states that make up the National Hispanic Advisory Council for Trump. That is a joint campaign and RNC effort. And the whole idea, according to a press release this morning, is to, quote, discuss strategies for ensuring the Hispanic community understands Mr. Trump's proposals to turn around an anemic economy, revive a shrinking middle class, and end international terrorism. And Hispanic voters are not the only ones that Trump is courting right now. He is asking African Americans, especially those in the inner cities, which have recently favored Democratic candidates, to give him a chance, because Trump is arguing their support of liberals hasn't left them with much. He thinks he can do a lot better, and that at the very least they should try something different.
What do you have to lose? You're living in poverty. Your schools are no good. You have no jobs. 58% of your youth is unemployed. What the hell do you have to lose?
And the Republican nominee isn't just trying to figure out new people to promote his agenda to. He's trying to figure out new ways to diminish the Democratic opponent, Hillary Clinton. Tweeting last night just after 7 p.m., quote, hashtag where's Hillary sleeping. Now, this is part of an effort that Trump has been making the last few days to question whether or not Hillary Clinton has the mental stamina and the physical stamina to serve as president. He says that he does not think she does. Whether or not we hear more about that from Trump tonight for his big Saturday night event remains to be seen. But if it continues the way that things have been going the last few days, it will be scripted and it will be on message, whatever the message is tonight, that the new brain trust in charge of his campaign wants out now that Paul Manafort is out of the picture. Uma?
All right, Peter Ducey on the ground there in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Thank you very much. Political observers are saying this has been a much better week for him, with a pivot on the campaign trail, delivering more effective speeches as a more disciplined and focused candidate. His scripted speeches are a departure from his controversial, freewheeling remarks, yet he's still maintaining a populist spirit on everything from law and order to jobs. I had a chance to catch up with former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, who says you can expect to see more of this Donald Trump out on the stump.
Well, I think he's laid out this week a rhythm and a pattern that could carry him to victory in November. He gave a great speech, a historic speech on Monday about the whole problem of Islamic radicalism. He gave an amazing speech on Tuesday night about the inner city, crime, but also poverty, education, the challenge for African Americans trapped in places by liberal institutions and liberal policies. Really was truly a historic speech. As you point out, he did a great job in North Carolina. Thursday night, people have said, may have been his best speech of the whole campaign so far. And frankly, he and Mike Pence going to Louisiana was exactly the right touch. You have President Obama off golfing, not willing to break into his vacation. For some reason, Hillary Clinton has taken a couple of days off to rest. And the one team that wanted to go down and look at what has been called the worst disaster in the last few years was, in fact, Trump and Pence. And I think it's sent exactly the right signal of concern and compassion and willingness to go to where problems are and to have the energy and the drive to do it.
Well, that leads me to my next question with you, because I know that you've been a big advocate of having Donald Trump go directly to places to connect with Americans where there are real problems in our country. As you pointed out, we saw him meeting with law enforcement in Milwaukee, traveling to Louisiana to get a firsthand look at the devastation from the floods and talk with folks who are really hurting right now. So you pointed out that the president is staying on vacation. Do you think that this is going to put the Democrats now on defense because Trump is right there where things are happening and he's meeting directly with people who are going to have a direct impact on the campaign, that he's going beyond the rallies on the road right now?
Well, I think there are two contrasts that are pretty striking. One is that Trump cares enough to show up and Obama doesn't and stays playing golf. The other is that Trump has the sheer energy and drive to get on the airplane and go to Louisiana. I can't imagine why Hillary Clinton would choose resting for 2 days over going to Louisiana, but she did. So you may see a growing contrast in energy level as the Trump people think this is a significant subliminal issue in the campaign, that he has the drive, he has the energy, he has the toughness, he can take it on, and he believes that she does not.
So, again, I want to ask you, though, did you have a direct hand in getting him to focus on taking his message beyond the rallies, to actually go to some of the hot spots in our country where people would like to see how he reacts to those situations?
Oh, these decisions are made by a very small number of people around Trump, in the airplane and at Trump Towers. They know where I stand. We have good friends with virtually all of them. And they know, first of all, because they watch me on your show, and they get lots of emails from me and occasional phone calls. But they're running the campaign. They're making the day-to-day decisions. For example, when he was in Milwaukee, in a moment that had been a real crisis for people in Milwaukee, he had two great advisors. He had Sheriff Clark, who is a national leader on crime, and he had Mayor Giuliani, probably the best mayor in the last 50 years at defeating crime and lowering the murder rate. I mean, what a team to put together to give the speech Tuesday night.
I want to get your reaction to the departure of Trump's campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, just days after Team Trump announced the expansion of the campaign leadership team to include Kellyanne Conway and Steve Bannon.
I do think Trump wanted a very aggressive fall campaign. And in Steve Bannon, who has been the head of Breitbart, and in Kellyanne Conway, who is a terrific pollster and really very knowledgeable political operative, he's got a team that will, I think, accelerate the speed and the tempo in the direction that Trump wants to go in.
I wanted to get your reaction to the news also that if Hillary Clinton wins the election, the Clinton Foundation will no longer accept foreign and corporate donations, and that Bill Clinton would resign from the board in an effort to head off any conflicts of interest. Some might ask, why didn't this happen when she was Secretary of State?
Yeah, they're now in an impossible situation. You've had Democratic former Governor Ed Rendell, former Democratic National Chairman, come out flatly and say they ought to close the foundation. You've had the Boston Globe, a very liberal newspaper, say they should close the foundation. This half step is an absurdity, and it raises all the questions. The 4 years she was Secretary of State, you had Bill Clinton running around the planet making millions and millions of dollars out of dictatorships, out of Russian banks, out of a variety of investments. And you have to say to yourself that the scandal of the Clinton Foundation on top of the scandal of the emails may be enough to sink her candidacy.
And on the subject of those emails, she's now saying that it was Colin Powell who gave her advice to have a separate server.
Well, you just have to ask yourself, you have Colin Powell, one of the most respected members of the American military, Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and you have Hillary Clinton, who's lied about everything else. Now, if they take two different positions, what would you bet that she's the one who's wrong? I would say about 90-1.
Overall, the fallout for her, you think this is going to continue to be drip, drip, drip as we head to the fall in terms of the revelations that are going to come forward from some of those emails?
I had a chance yesterday to take a 2-hour briefing on an overview of Clinton world. And it was so staggering. There's so much stuff coming out in September. I don't think she'll ever get out from under it. There's just corruption after corruption after corruption. And almost none of it yet has seen the surface. When it does, I think her candidacy will just drown.
Wow. That's a sobering prediction indeed from you, Mr. Speaker. I know you've gone on the record saying that you still really believe that Donald Trump can win this.
Well, look, if she drowns, he wins. I mean, the fact is, if all of this stuff crashes in on her and she gets beat, the person who's going to win is Donald Trump.
We do not pay ransom. We didn't here, and we don't. We won't in the future.
I make no apologies for the fact that at the end game, in the very final hours, we used the leverage of having that money to make sure that the Iranians didn't renege on the lengthy, long, months-long negotiations that it took to get our Americans out of there. It was the smart thing to do. It was the prudent thing to do.
Well, the controversy and fallout continues this week over that $400 million payment to Iran following the release of 4 American hostages set free back in January. In a major retraction from its earlier position, the State Department now admitting that the money shipment to Iran was directly released and tied to the hostages being set free. Critics are crying foul, saying this news confirms what the White House has been denying, that the U.S. paid a ransom and that this sets a dangerous course for the future. Joining us now with reaction, General Jack Keane, former Vice Chief of Staff for the U.S. Army and the Chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, along with being a Fox News military analyst. Welcome, General. Great to have you on the show today.
Good to be here.
I know you're very concerned about what has happened. Despite those repeated denials, what message is this sending to rogue nations like Iran? After all, it was Iran that first announced and boasted that the $400 million was a ransom payment instead of our government giving the American people the full story.
Well, you put your finger on really the issue. I mean, we're arguing in this country, was it ransom, was it not? And, you know, it's sort of irrelevant at the end of the day because the Iranians absolutely believe it was ransom. Their state-drawn media said the same. Every Middle Eastern country has picked up that story that this was ransom for the release of the hostages. And the telling truth of that is it has already affected Iran's behavior because they have 3 more American hostages in their jailhouse. So it is stunning that we're sitting over here trying to argue about it when, in fact, it has impacted Iran's behavior. They had a windfall propaganda story as a result of this, and we look like we executed something that was boneheaded and amateurish. And it's really quite embarrassing for our government.
Well, let's talk about that situation that's developed now with those other Americans who are being held hostage in Iran since that payment was made. The administration promised that there would be better cooperation with Iran after the nuke deal, yet it appears, of course, that once again Iran can't be trusted for the promises it makes.
Oh, is that the truth? After the nuke deal ended last July, the Iranians took the gloves off, sent unequivocal messages to the Middle East that they are the dominant power in the Middle East, that they've been involved in negotiations for 18 months. They fired off 3 now, medium-range ballistic missiles, looking for attempts to humiliate the United States and sending a clear, unequivocal message to all the nations in the Middle East that their objectives to eventually dominate and control the Middle East is what they're about. You put your finger right on it. They are going to continue to do that, and the idea that in 10 or 15 years, during that time frame of the nuclear deal, that Iran will join the international community of nations is the height of naivety.
I want to switch now to some news that's developed out of Syria, with the Pentagon warning the Syrian government against carrying out airstrikes near the U.S. and allied personnel, because that did happen on Friday, one day after those attacks, causing the U.S. to scramble jets to protect its special operation forces there. What do you make of this?
Well, the complicated airspace, certainly over Syria, is an issue for us, and it's been there some time, particularly with the introduction of the Russians. What took place here is the Syrians are trying to run some airstrikes against ISIS. We are on the ground there with some special ops assisting what's called the Syrian Democratic Force, and they're mostly Kurds, but also some Syrian Arabs, and those bombs they were dropping came dangerously close to our people. We have got to get this straight with the Syrians and particularly with the Russians in terms of what they're doing there. The Russians should have been sent unequivocal messages a long time ago when they started last September with their bombing campaigns, the first group that they bombed were the Syrian moderates that the United States was assisting. And after that, we should have sent them a clear message by cratering a runway saying, never again. And I believe in my whole heart that that would have stopped them, because Putin backs away from a fight when somebody calls his bluff.
Yeah, when he's
this
backed
is a
up into
dangerous
corner.
situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a dangerous situation here, but we have the mechanism to take charge of it. The Syrian pilots do not want to get engaged in any kind of a fight with the United States. They cannot match our technology, and mostly don't come anywhere close to the skills of our pilots.
That's a very serious situation indeed. General, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us with your insights. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, great talking to you today.
Welcome back, everybody. Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio facing some serious legal problems right now. The federal judge is recommending criminal contempt charges against a longtime Metro Phoenix sheriff for allegedly ignoring a court order in a racial profiling case. Now, the sheriff could be forced from office if convicted of a felony, though the case could also be pursued as a misdemeanor. The 84-year-old Arpaio seeking a 7th term this year.
The time is overdue to develop a new screening test for the threats we face today. I call it extreme vetting. I call it extreme vetting. Our country has enough problems. We don't need more. And these are problems like we've never had before.
That's Donald Trump in Ohio earlier this week laying out his plans to fight terrorism. The Republican presidential nominee vowing to significantly overhaul the country's immigrant screening process. His remarks come as the Pentagon sends 15 high-risk Gitmo detainees to the United Arab Emirates this week, making this the largest single release so far during the Obama White House. Bridget Gabriel is the president of ActForAmerica.org. She's also the author of They Must Be Stopped. Brigitte, it's good to have you on the program today. I know that, Mr. Trump's remarks are causing some controversy in some circles by saying that this extreme vetting is still very ambiguous, that it may be unfairly targeting people, specifically Muslims, here in this country. How do you respond to this?
Well, we have to protect the country, and any patriotic American who loves this country, whether they are Muslim, Christian, Jews, atheists, Buddhists, Hindus, or anything else, should not have a problem with what Trump is saying, because we all love this country and we want to protect this country. And if anybody has a problem with seriously vetting people coming into the country, especially at a time of war like now, they should be scrutinized, because obviously there is something that they are hiding.
This cannot happen, though, effectively, many people are saying, without the support of the Muslim community in this country, to make sure that this goes along in a way without creating alarm and fear. How do you respond to that, and what can be done to bridge that gap, to get more people coming together, to look at this in a very realistic way without generating more concerns that this may be racially biased?
Uma, it's about time we see more patriotism on the part of the Muslim community and less terrorism. Let's face it, we are a nation right now in a state of alarm. We are a nation at a state of fear. When we have San Bernardino, when we have Orlando, when we have Fort Hood, when we are worried when we're walking down our streets that a jihadist is going to walk with a machete and start hashing people, we are concerned as a nation. This is the time to throw political correctness. We have a problem and we need to identify the problem. And right now, the terrorism is not coming from the Buddhist community. It's not coming from the Christian community. It's not coming from the Jewish community. It is coming from the Islamic community. Because regardless who perpetrated the attack or what country they came from, the thing that they have all in common is they all adhere to the Islamic ideology, and that ideology is what Trump is talking about and why we must address it as a nation.
Let's focus for just a moment on the other part of the story that we're also focusing on, is about the concerns over the release of the Gitmo detainees. This latest release signals the largest group that's been released so far, with President Obama promising to make good on his assurances that he wants to close Gitmo. These folks sent to the United Arab Emirates. What do you think about the way this is being handled, particularly with the fact that we are seeing and hearing more reports that a number of those who have been released return back to the battleground?
Exactly, and it's ironic that this week in particular, the former bodyguard of Osama bin Laden, which we had released in 2012, and he of course immediately joined Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula in 2014, this week wrote an article and issued a warning to the United States saying, we are going to attack you, we're going to have jihadists who are English speaking, who have Western names, who are not on the CIA, on the FBI list, who are going to attack you. And he continued saying that these people may have even served in your own army. They may have drank alcohol. They may have eaten pork in the past, but they will be attacking you and they are coming for you. And this is happening this week on the heel of Obama saying, oh, we're going to release more people. We're sending them to the Gulf. We have seen already the writing on the wall. This is not opinion. We already know that a lot of them have gone back to the field. They are recruiting. They are training. And by the way, when they go back, they are treated as heroes because they are the example of what a true jihadist should be all about. And the youth looks up to them. The youth look up to them. They follow them. And they are even more dangerous than just some jihadist who decides to make a name for himself.
No, it is a big concern because we are seeing and hearing, as I mentioned, reports of several of these individuals going back and joining the fight and getting involved with terrorist groups even after years of being detained here in Guantanamo Bay. Brigitte, it's always great to have you on the program. Thanks so much for joining us with your insights.
Thank you.
Well, Donald Trump making a new push for African-American voters, how he's trying to woo that critical voting bloc from Hillary Clinton. Dr. Ben Carson plans to join us with his thoughts just ahead. Plus, Hillary Clinton facing some new legal problems over her use of a private email server while she was Secretary of State, the new details, and what this could mean for her campaign going forward. Welcome back, everybody. Well, Hillary Clinton back in the hot seat over her private email server as a federal judge now orders her to answer questions in writing from a conservative watchdog group. Brian Yennis is joining us now live with more on this story from our New York City newsroom. Brian, what kind of questions will she be facing right now?
Well, hi, Uma. Look, the federal judge, Emmett Sullivan, yesterday in Washington, D.C., ordered that Hillary Clinton must answer written questions about her private email server under oath within 30 days of receiving them. And the conservative watchdog organization Judicial Watch, which filed the Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, has until October 14th to submit these questions. And the group tells Fox they're disappointed that the judge denied the request to have her answer questions in person, but they'll submit written questions in the coming days to ensure she has to answer them before Election Day.
The important thing is that we will now have her on the record, under oath, something no one else has ever done. And it was ordered by a court, ordered by a judge who's actually appointed by her husband. Why did she do it? How did she set it up? Who did she order? And how did they go about doing that? It's all the unanswered questions, frankly, that the American public is really due at this point.
Of course, he's talking about the private email server, and in response, the Clinton campaign responded, quote, Judicial Watch is a right-wing organization that has been attacking the Clintons since the 1990s. This is just another lawsuit intended to try to hurt Hillary Clinton's campaign, and so we are glad that the judge has accepted our offer to answer these questions in writing rather than grant Judicial Watch's request. Clinton can request a delay, and if granted, she could push off having to answer these written questions until after Election Day. Uma?
And so where is Mrs. Clinton this weekend? Is she out campaigning?
She's actually fundraising. She's in Nantucket, Massachusetts today for 2 fundraising events. She'll have another event with Cher tomorrow in Massachusetts, and not really him. Uma?
All right, the Clinton campaign firing back. Brian, thank you very much.
No problem.
Well, as we've mentioned, Donald Trump is making a new push for support from African-American voters. This, as a recent NBC Wall Street Journal poll shows Hillary Clinton leading him among African-Americans, a whopping 91% to just 1%.
Look how much African-American communities have suffered under Democratic control. To those I say the following. What do you have to lose by trying something new, like Trump. What do you have to lose?
And joining us now with more, former Republican presidential candidate, Dr. Ben Carson. Welcome, sir. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
You know, a lot of folks are giving credit to Donald Trump to try to make this big public outreach to minority communities, and those remarks were made this week, but critics pounced on him, saying that those remarks were made before a largely white audience.
Well, you know, it really doesn't matter what he does. He's going to be criticized, but the important thing is he's starting to reach out. You know, traditionally, the Republican Party has not reached out to the African-American community, to the Hispanic communities, because they've conceded those to the Democrats. And Donald Trump recognizes that if our country is to succeed, everybody has to succeed. We're all in the same boat, and if part of the boat sinks, the rest of it's going down too. So he's going to be offering real programs, not things that keep people in a state of dependency, but things that allow people to move out. For instance, just as one example, we've got $2.1 trillion overseas. Bringing that back, repatriating that money without a tax burden, but with a requirement that 10% of it be used in enterprise zones and to create jobs for people who are underemployed, unemployed, or on welfare. That would be the biggest stimulus since FDR's New Deal. And you can use that for infrastructure programs too. You know, that's low-hanging fruit. Doesn't cost the taxpayers one penny. And as far as the school systems are concerned, you have so many people who are stuck in failing school systems, and that has a tremendous impact on what happens in the rest of their lives. He's going to be dealing with that with school choice, with voucher programs, and also looking at the prison system. We've got a high recidivism rate. People go in with no skills. They go in with no education. They come out with no skills and no education. What are they going to do? They go right back to the same thing that got them in there in the first place. We have to change that. We have to change on the front end so that we don't have so many people going into the prison. These are things that need to be looked at that have not been dealt with by the progressive movement that's been in charge, particularly of our inner cities, for a very long period of time. They don't like it when people like me talk about it. You know, they call us all kinds of names. But the fact of the matter is, they want to maintain control. They want to cultivate votes. But we need to be looking at something more than that. And Donald Trump recognizes that he's not going to get a lot of those votes the first time around. But if he gets into office and these programs, he will.
How do you translate that message, though, to folks in the inner cities who really believe that, you know, many politicians only show up in their neighborhoods when it's voting time, that so often they feel disengaged from the process and believe that there have been so many broken promises in the past? Why should they believe someone like Donald Trump right now? Do you expect him to go directly into the inner cities as this fall to try to take that message and drive it home about, you know, the fact that he wants to create better urban environments and that he wants to bring jobs and create better schools where people have seen those schools failing over the last several years?
Without question. He will be going into the inner cities and talking to some of these groups. No question about that. Because, again, you know, he's not like your traditional politician. All they do is they pander and they promise. But I hope he really makes the point to people, you know, the progressives are saying, let's take this pie. And, you know, these people have a bigger share of it than you do. So let's redivide this and redistribute that so that we make everything fair. It sounds great. It sounds wonderful. And then nothing changes. And what he's talking about is making a lot of pies. So rather than you taking from this person and giving to this person, let's make a lot of pies, a lot of opportunities for everybody. That's how America got to be such a powerhouse in a very short period of time. And we can easily do that by taking away some of the incredible restrictions. You look at a small employer, less than 50 employees in a manufacturing segment. The average cost per employee to comply with all the regulations is $34,000 a year. Now, how in the world is he going to be competitive with another country. You know, these are the kinds of things that Trump understands that Hillary Clinton doesn't have a clue about.
All right, Dr. Ben Carson telling us that we're going to see more of Donald Trump hitting the urban centers of the country, trying to make that pitch and hoping that he can woo more African American and Latino voters to his camp. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you, Emma.
Well,
all right, it's been another roller coaster week for the Trump campaign. This week, the Republican nominee brings in a new, non-traditional team to lead his White House bid. Former Breitbart head Steve Bannon and pollster Kellyanne Conway will be steering the ship behind the scenes. On the main stage, Donald Trump is making his pitch to minority voters, announcing his Hispanic Advisory Committee today and asking last night African-American voters what they have to lose by voting for him. Let's take a fair and balanced look at the Trump campaign so far. Fox News contributor Angela McGlowan and Joe Listingy, who is a partner with the Chatterton Group. Thank you both for joining me. I appreciate it. All right, let's listen to that soundbite from last night. Some of our viewers may not have heard it, where we heard Donald Trump really appealing to a voter group, and then I want to get your reaction. Take a listen.
You're living in poverty. Your schools are no good. You have no jobs. 58% of your youth is unemployed. What the hell do you have to lose?
What the hell do you have to lose? That's quite blunt. Effective?
No. It's condescending, condescending, condescending.
It's not a monolithic group. He's not speaking to one voter. Is that right?
You're correct. But I want to say this. You do have blacks that have traditionally voted Democratic after LBJ. And I talk about that in my book, Bamboozle. Great plug, get it? But the bottom line is this. We're not monolithic. And I think that the black vote is up for grabs if you have the right message. And if you go into those diversity districts, go into the black churches. Go meet before the NAACP. Don't be afraid. Go meet before the National Organization of La Raza for the Hispanic vote.
Absolutely. Is it up for grabs? I mean, Democrats have been appealing to this voter group for a long time. Yeah. Is it really up for grabs in 2016?
I actually don't think it really is. And in fact, the polling numbers show 1%, 2% for Donald Trump in this election is the worst that a Republican has ever had with this demographic. This is the problem that Republicans have. The African-American vote after the 60s and 70s, as Angela had pointed out, really came hard to the Democratic Party. And then they shared that with their kids, and their kids continue to share that with their kids.
And welfare, too, as well.
So
that's the reason why we became Democrats, because of welfare.
And the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act.
Because of discrimination. I just said that, because of discrimination.
Yes.
But now it's time to make a change. It has been a generational process.
I wish you the best of luck in that. The problem also comes, though, with Hispanics, where George Bush did very well with Hispanic voters. And then they abandoned in droves after the debacle, the immigration policy that he had put up, and Republicans refused to support. Now, here's the other thing that's coming in. In less than a generation, we will be a majority-minority state in many of these battlegrounds. North Carolina, Florida.
That's not here, there.
And
that's
those
in the future.
Voters, those voters, as they lock in and participate with Democrats, will stay locked in. And that's a big problem for Republicans. They have to solve that.
We have something that transcends race, and that's poverty. Poverty transcends race. And we have more poverty with Obama's policies and Hillary's policies.
So you're saying jobs and economic opportunities.
There you go.
Sure.
So if you go into the community, you talk about empowerment zones. That was Jack Kemp. I can go down the line. I worked for Bob Dole. If you go in and speak to us, what are you going to do? But by coming to us and saying, what do you have to lose? That's very condescending.
I agree. I mean, this is Angela, you're dead on. The problem you have, though, is that African-American voters are very smart. They're not going to be swell.
Oh, thank you so much. We're smart. And Hispanic voters. I'm a woman as well. Am I smart too?
They make their own decisions, and they have chosen the Democratic Party.
He's a liberal, guys. I just want you to know.
Whether or not we can say that Republicans need them and that Republicans are going to make advances, they still get to choose, and they have been choosing Democrats. So we can talk about failed policies, but on the ground, they see this. And they know who they want.
Now, I can give you this, Joe, even though, African Americans were smart. Liberals are very good, not that message, on messaging and communication and getting out the vote. They go into the diversity districts. They go into our churches. They go where we meet. And Republicans are clumsy communicators, number one. And number two, they're afraid to go in.
Yeah, look at the but look at the Trump meeting that's going on with the Hispanics. They're coming to Trump Tower. They're coming to the gold-laden tower instead of Donald Trump going into their neighborhoods.
Is a start.
And that's an important
Hopefully some of his people are watching this segment, because after that he can go to the advocacy groups. And we are not good as Republicans on advocacy.
Okay, I heard you say something I never thought you would say before. You said the liberals are really smart on messaging. Obviously, headlines this week. Donald Trump has made a huge shift in his campaign staff. It's not the first time that we've seen him make a huge shift. You just spoke about messaging, how he needs to change his messaging. He did that change on Friday. It still may not have been entirely effective. Do you think that he's going to be able to really make that positive step forward with this new staff?
There's no question that he has a challenge with women and conservatives. With Steve Bannon, he has a messaging for conservatives. I've known Kellyanne for a very, very long time. Very talented lady, knows about advocacy, knows about polling, and knows about messaging. So now I can see if Donald Trump will really listen to his advisors.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you the last word.
No, I mean, this was a shakeup that needed to happen. Manafort's Russian ties were going to destroy all of his messaging on foreign policy. So what does he do? He goes out and he gets Bannon, the CEO of an organization that had a reporter just this year get assaulted by one of his previous managers, and he refused to stand by her. So he's going to continue to have these problems. In the end, he did what every businessman needs to do: change management. The problem is now you lose the consistency of that management.
We still haven't had our October surprise.
Well, we know that he can run a business. Let's see if he can run a campaign. We still have 80 days left, so I'm sure we'll be back to have this conversation.
Thank you so much.
Angela, thank you so much. Really interesting. We appreciate it.
And when I won in Wisconsin, and when I win in Wisconsin, we're going to come back here. We're going to celebrate. It's going to be amazing. And I'm going to be with you. I'm going to be with you tomorrow. I'm going to be with you the next day.
Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump already counting on Wisconsin's 10 electoral votes in November. And in fact, he's been spending a lot of time in states that don't exactly have a history of voting Republican. Wisconsin hasn't gone red since 1984, and current polls are not exactly in his favor. The Real Clear Politics average of recent Badger State polls has Trump down by almost 10 points. So, does Trump have a chance to change the conversation? Here to weigh in, talk radio host Vicki McKenna from the great city of Madison, Wisconsin. Nice to see you again, Vicki.
Great to be here again. Donald Trump's got some work to do in our great state.
Well, you know, you correctly predicted that Ted Cruz was going to win in Wisconsin during the primary. What's your prediction here for the general?
Well, if the election were held tomorrow, Donald Trump would lose Wisconsin. But the election isn't tomorrow, so he's got some opportunity. He's got some time. Look, I think he can win over the Republicans in Wisconsin. He's going to have to make some changes. But I don't know if he can win the state, only because, you know, as you mentioned, history is against him, and he hasn't really been doing much in Wisconsin to alter the message enough to try to make himself sort of broad appeal like Scott Walker has been as governor of our state. So I think it's a tough slog for him. I think he's actually got to shore up some Republican support first, because he's not even there with the Republicans yet in our state.
Well, you know, you say that, and it's kind of interesting because if you listen to Trump on the stump, he will tell you that blue-collar Reagan Democrats, of which you got a lot of in Wisconsin, are going to go big for him. Why don't you think that's translating? Why is his message not translating with those folks in Wisconsin, especially the ones that call into your show?
Well, it's because so far he hasn't really had much of a different message in Wisconsin. Look, Wisconsin Republicans are a pretty intelligent bunch of Republicans. They're very activist. They're very, very well informed. We have southeastern Wisconsin that is just blanketed with talk radio. We have Republicans that don't seek out their information from the mainstream press. We have Republicans that you can't just, you know, fly in, pop in every now and again, pat them on the head and say, you know, you're exactly like Michigan. We're going to treat you like Michigan. You're exactly like Indiana. We'll treat you like that. Wisconsin Republicans are different. We've gone through the wars. We've gone through the battles for our governor. In recall elections, we do activism a bit differently. And I think he's actually going to have to respect the fact that we know a lot more about our state than he does.
Well, you think about it, folks who know a lot about your state, two people. One would be Scott Walker, who's obviously won 3 elections, although he didn't have broad national appeal. He hasn't really come out that strong for Donald Trump, certainly isn't out working for him and a surrogate and those kinds of things. The other person is Paul Ryan, who absolutely trounced his pro-Trump primary challenger.
I'll tell you what's going on right now. Congressman Ryan and Governor Walker, they're doing what they can given what they've got to work with in terms of a candidate. I know that Donald Trump has switched over his management team. In the last 3 days, his messaging has been much, much better and much, much more amenable to the ears of Wisconsin voters. I think if he stays on message like he has been, going into West Bend, talking about city issues, going into, downtown Milwaukee and actually talking about the things that we in Wisconsin talk and care about, I think you may see Governor Walker and Congressman Ryan be a little bit more enthusiastic, but these are reform-minded Republicans. These are deep policy Republicans. And unless they see a little bit more game from Donald Trump here, I'm not sure you're going to see them be able to be sort of the enthusiastic cheerleaders they were for Mitt Romney, for John McCain. But I think Donald Trump can change that, and I think his last 3 days, at least in our state, have been very, very positive for him.
You think about the way Wisconsin voted 2004. It was very, very close to Bush winning Wisconsin. He didn't, but he got much closer than anybody has since going back to 1984. Last question for you. An interesting piece in The Atlantic discussing the fact that where Donald Trump does well is not in cities and towns that are particularly bad off, but rather cities and towns that are industrial that have seen a little bit of a resurgence. Where is Wisconsin on that spectrum? And I know it's a big state, but still, is Wisconsin really still hurting, or have things gotten substantially better there, you think?
I think things have gotten substantially better here, particularly with the election of Governor Walker and some of our key changes. We are now, in the top tier leading manufacturing states. We have seen our budget situation turn around. Our incomes are actually coming back online. We've seen sales tax revenue increase, which means consumers are buying more. The economic situation is I would say in the last 6 years has gotten better here in Wisconsin, especially given that we have come out of a recession. But listen, I think Donald Trump's biggest challenge in our state is going to be taking that 79% of Republican enthusiasm that he's got nationally, and it's probably about the same here, and turning that into 90% enthusiasm. That all has to do with messaging. That all has to do with him.
Vicki, there's a lot of Republicans.
That all has to do with him letting go of the bumper stickers.
Well, there's a lot of Republicans who listen to your radio show. I've got 10 seconds. You think Donald Trump's going to come on as he does local radio and do your show or not?
Donald Trump is welcome to come back on my program anytime. He can cold call me, and I'll take the call.
Well, we'll see if it happens. If it does, come back and chat with us about it. Thanks, Vicki.
Thanks, guys.
All the best. Liz?
Hopefully.